Welcome back to the latest edition of Conference Chatter TV, where in this episode I talk about finally having that undefeated week that I was hoping for in picking Big 12 games, Nebraska's defense proving why it's one of the best in the country, Kansas's defense proving why it is not, and Texas Tech's quarterback passes for 7 touchdowns against K-State. Well, let's start in the Big 12 North because I'm looking at two teams that are atop this conference, and I'm looking at two teams that are winning in completely different ways. Let's start with the Huskers, who had a 27-12 victory over Missouri on Thursday. This was a statement game by the Nebraska defense, particularly Ndamukong Suh with an interception, a sack, a forced fumble, and 6 tackles against Missouri, which was a good offense coming into this game and still is a pretty good offense. You know, the weather was a factor and everything, but look, Blaine Gabbert, 17 of 43, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Nebraska's defensive line just put constant pressure on Gabbert throughout the entire game, made him, run outside, throw a ton of passes that he didn't want, and that's why you had that pressure. You had 17 of 43 passing, a ton of incomplete passes, and credit the defensive line for a lot of those incompletions. Now the Nebraska defense, second in the country in scoring defense, giving up only 8 points per game. They really stepped up and showed me a ton in this game. And they could have had, I was watching the game, they probably could have had 3 or 4 interceptions. The D-line, they were reading Blaine Gabbert. They, jumped up and could, barely missed a couple of interceptions. They could have had a few more, but they played great. And Nebraska, credit them, 27 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. They put the game away in Columbia and won in a pretty hostile environment. Next week, it should be very interesting to see what Nebraska does. They're at home to Texas Tech, obviously a potent passing offense there that Mike Leach has in Lubbock. I'm really going to be curious to see if Nebraska can continue this play against teams like Texas Tech. I mean, Missouri had a great offense coming into the game, and Nebraska pretty much, shut them out the majority of that game, really controlled the pace of play. And then there's Kansas, which I predicted to beat Iowa State. I thought it would be more than 41-36. But it's no secret. Kansas's defense must improve. For an offense that's so unbelievable, I mean, arguably the best. I think Kansas's offense is the best offense in the Big 12 North, arguably the best offense in the Big 12. But can this defense step up and play to a level that will allow Kansas to win the Big 12 North this year? That will be the question. Let's take a look at Iowa State's total yards in their first 4 games before facing Kansas on Saturday. 442, 303, 404, 376, 371, 512 against Kansas. So they were really in that, anywhere from 350 to, 400, 442 the first week, but that was against North Dakota State, who's now 1-5, so it probably should have been more. But 512 total yards for Iowa State against Kansas, far and away their most efficient offensive performance of the year for the Cyclones. I mean, Kansas, thank goodness for the Jayhawks offense, because they would not be 5-0 right now, obviously, without them. The defense really needs a game to bounce back. Next week, KU will travel to Colorado to face the Buffaloes, and that's an opportunity for the defense to prove again that it can get by. I mean, I think that KU's defense is somewhere in between what we've seen so far, somewhere in between that Iowa State game and, the earlier games against Southern Miss and UTEP and all that. I don't think they're quite that bad, but they're going to need to play better if they want to win the North, because you look at Kansas and Nebraska right now, and I think, I don't think there's any question that the Huskers are playing the best football right now in the Big 12 North. They've been tested more. They've gone to Blacksburg. They almost beat Virginia Tech. They should have. They've gone to Columbia and beat a very good Missouri team and put up 27 unanswered points in Columbia in the bad weather. Found a way to win. You look at KU, they haven't really played anybody that great yet. They have Iowa State and then the Colorado next. Southern Miss was okay. UTEP is okay. That's all fine. But KU's defense must improve for it to, win the Big 12 North, because a performance like that, if their defense plays like that, they're not winning the Big 12 North this year. Did I pick them to win the Big 12 North before the season? Yes. I think they still can. I think that the defense has a long way to go, though, before they get to that level. So we'll see what happens there. Let's move to the rest of the games. Texas Tech, 66. K-State, 14. Wow, what can you say about Stephen Sheffield? 490 yards passing, 7 touchdowns. He was not sacked once. 6 different Texas Tech receivers caught touchdown passes. I mean, the Red Raiders were everywhere on the field in K-State. I mean, it's plain and simple. This is just not a very good football team. I mean, 1 week after an inspiring performance by quarterback Grant Gregory against Iowa State, against Tech, he was sacked 3 times, was Gregory. He was pulled in the first half in favor of Carson Kaufman. Gregory only passed for 37 yards. I mean, it just was not an effective performance for K-State, and that's kind of a shame, because I thought they might have had something going with Gregory there against Iowa State and then Daniel Thomas, but I'm thinking that after this performance, it was more a product of the opponent last week, and that was, Iowa State. Texas Tech was all over K-State in this one. I thought it would be a lot closer. I predicted Texas Tech to win, but not by that much. Credit the Red Raiders for that performance. The next game I predicted was Texas, over Colorado, the easiest game to predict all season. But the Longhorns struggled earlier. It was 14-3 Colorado at one point. And I look at this game and I think, when you don't play your best game, these really good teams find different ways to put teams away. And that's exactly what Texas did. They just found different ways. Those different ways: a block punt return for a touchdown, a 74-yard punt return for a touchdown, and finally a 92-yard interception return for a touchdown. So when you don't have it, and Texas did not really have it on Saturday, they could not run the football. Colt McCoy, had a very good game, was very efficient. I think he threw for over, 80% completion percentage. He was fine. But they couldn't run the ball. So what do? Special teams. Texas's special teams have always been pretty darn good under Mac Brown. And they really, they really put the game away against Colorado. It could have been a lot closer had it not been for UT's special teams. So what does that do now? That sets up my favorite game of the season is Red River, Texas against OU next week. It'll be awesome. And speaking of Red River, Oklahoma 33, Baylor 7. Pretty easy game again to predict. The story in this one was the net rushing yards by both teams. Check this out. Baylor with 6 net rushing yards the entire game compared to Oklahoma's 197. I think that was the difference in the game. And sure, the Sooners weren't as efficient as they usually are in the red zone. Jimmy Stevens kicked 4 field goals, but it didn't really matter with how well Oklahoma's defense was playing. I mean, when you hold a team to 6 net rushing yards, that's you're going to win a few of those games. So OU, great defense. They're right behind Nebraska now, 3rd in the nation in scoring defense with 8.4 points allowed per game. This will be a great game in Red River because clearly Texas is going to be favored, but how will they respond to this well above average Oklahoma defense? I can't wait to see that game. It'll be unbelievable, as it usually always is. And finally, back to Week 6, the last game that I predicted correct was Oklahoma State 36, Texas A&M 31. Credit Keith Toston for Oklahoma State filling in for the injured Kendall Hunter with over 100 yards rushing. He was also a factor in the passing game, and Oklahoma State pulled out a tough one in College Station, a place where they have struggled to win in the past, so I credit the Cowboys for that. So 6-0, finally. I was looking at this week and I was thinking, this is a good week to go undefeated, because next week I was looking at it, and I think almost every game next week in the Big 12 could go either way. So I had to capitalize on this week. It was great, 6-0. We're picking at an 81.8% clip right now, 45-10 on the year. So I needed this one. I really needed this week, because Week 7 next week could really go either way. So, hey guys, I appreciate you checking out the latest episode of Conference Chatter TV. My name is Eric Sorrentino. I'm signing off, and I will talk to you guys again next week. Thanks.